Welcome to GRE. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. An affordable way to simultaneously invest like a billionaire, get diversified in multiple ways with real estate, help the earth, and if you prefer, even achieve residency in a second nation. Today on Get Rich Education. When you want the best real estate and finance info, the modern internet experience limits your free articles access, and it's replete with paywalls, and you've got pop-ups and push notifications and cookies disclaimers. Ugh. At no other time in history has it been more vital to place nice, clean, free content into your hands that actually adds no hype value to your life. See, this is the golden age of quality newsletters, and I write every word of ours myself. It's got a dash of humor, and it's to the point. To get the letter, it couldn't be more simple. Text GRE to 66866. And when you start the free newsletter, you'll also get my 1-hour fast real estate course completely free. It's called the Don't Quit Your Daydream Letter, and it wires your mind for wealth. Make sure you read it. Text GRE to 66866. Text GRE to 66866.
You're listening to the show that has created more financial freedom than nearly any show in the world. This is Get Rich Education.
Welcome to GRE, from Sorrento, Italy to Sacramento, California, and across 188 nations worldwide. I'm Keith Weinhold, and you're listening to Get Rich Education, the voice of real estate since 2014. As we're 2 months into the year now, and the U.S. economy has continued to stay strong, let me ask, how's your portfolio doing? And how resilient is your real estate? How diverse is it? How would you grade yourself on those criteria?
I would give myself, look, I hate to do it, but I will do it. I would give myself an A+. Is that enough? Can I go higher than that?
Well, whether you're, straight A's or not, consider this. Landreport.com, they recently published a report about America's top 100 landowners. Now, land could be vacant and non-residential, yet have active ranching or agriculture or forestry taking place. That way, the land produces something, while it might increase in value at the same time. But the reason that often land is the domain of the wealthy is that it's harder to get loans for land, and therefore one must often pay all cash. Well, by the time that we're done today, you'll learn about producing land that's actually available at such a low price point that a loan typically is not required for you to buy it. In 2024, America's largest landowner is Red Emerson. That's what the report found. Red and his family own 2.4 million acres in California, Oregon, and Washington through their timber products company. And the Emersons, they became America's largest landowners in 2021 when they acquired 175,000 acres in Oregon from another timber company. Well, with that acquisition, the Emersons surpassed Liberty Media chairman John Malone's 2.2 million acres. And then in third place is CNN founder Ted Turner. Yeah, he's America's third largest landowner with 2 million acres in the southeast, on the Great Plains, and across the west. And it was a few years ago now. It was 2020 when news broke that Microsoft co-founder Bill Gates was America's largest farmland owner with more than 260,000 acres. So the wealthy are attracted to real assets that can produce yield in something like land, which they aren't making more of. That's the backdrop for today. Surely we'll talk about income-producing land, although most years it won't pay out, and it's available to any investor, big or small. But before we do, let me share that about 10 days ago, I climbed up the highest point on Earth here. While we're talking about non-residential real estate, well, where was it? Where was I? Yes, I was on Earth's highest piece of real estate, Kind of a trivia question here. And I used to think that that must mean Mount Everest, but it's not. So there's a clue for you there. Where is Earth's highest point? As you ponder that, I'll give you the answer later. Let's talk about investing like a billionaire with the opportunity to own producing land deeded to you. We've discussed this topic before, but it's been quite some time, and there have been some important updates, including a sawmill for the production timber. After success in the computer industry, today's guest formed ECI Development in 1996, I suppose going on nearly 30 years now. He served on advisory boards for the NAR. As a resort community developer, they have projects in Belize, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, El Salvador, Honduras, and Panama. And neighborhoods include homes, condominiums, golf courses, and over 5 miles of beachfront. So they got some really beautiful properties. He and I first met in person in 2016. He and his family lived in Central America from 2002 to 2016. Hey, it's always fantastic to have back on GRE. And I guess I must button up here because it is the chairman and CEO, Michael Cobb.
Keith, good to be with you. Thanks for having me back on the show. It's fun to have these conversations. I didn't realize we met in 2016. That's a little while ago. Yeah.
It has been 8 years. Yes, we met in the region then down there. And Mike's about the most relatable and down-to-earth guy that you can find. And literally down to earth is, besides the resort development, you've made it easy and inexpensive for investors worldwide to buy producing teak tree parcels. But before we discuss that, you've got a project that's drawn a lot of interest on Ambergris Caye, Belize, which many of our listeners already know. That's Belize's largest island and its top tourist destination. I have visited and owned property there, and it's coming online next year. It's pretty exciting. Tell us about it.
It is exciting. It's been in the works for, goodness, 8 years. I think we signed our contract with Marriott maybe 7-8 years ago. We started construction just about a year ago, last January, so almost exactly a year. Yeah, it's a Marriott resort, 202-room oceanfront resort. It's fantastic. It will be done in August of 2025, soft opening, hard opening, October 25. So yeah, about 16, 18 months from now, have this project finally finished. You know, the big challenging thing in this part of the world is financing, right? It's really hard to get financing or affordable financing, let me say it that way.
Yeah.
And so we took our time and we would not start a project until it was fully funded. I think a lot of challenges are people start these projects are kind of betting on the come, right? That, oh, well, we'll figure it out later. And we don't operate that way. We've been around for, 28 years. And so we're very, very conservative. And until we had all the money to build the hotel, the resort, we did not start. And so we kicked it off last January. Was just down there last week. Steel is arriving. The superstructure's already going up. Yeah, man, it's just so nice to see it really coming to fruition. But, it's prudence and patience to take our time, make sure we have all the funding, and then launch so that what we start finishes. And that's really been our mantra for almost 3 decades now.
Make it up, make it real, make it happen. And the largest town there on Ambergris Caye, Belize, just a few decades ago, it was still this sleepy fishing village. And with the setting that island has and all the great snorkeling and everything else, it's really become popular. And as boutique hotels grew into larger hotels, it was probably, 10 years ago, perhaps, that you saw some of these big brands start to take more of an interest, like Hilton and Marriott, in branding the buildings.
Well, it is. And, I give a presentation called Why Belize, Why Right Now? And you nailed it there, Keith, when you talked about the timelines, right? And how a country or a region, it's not even a country in this case, Ambergris Caye, it's very specific, right? How Ambergris Caye, Belize has moved through this timeline, this path of progress. And at some point, it goes from being a niche market or a no-name market to a niche market to a boutique market. And then all of a sudden, you're right. At some point, the brands start to pay attention. And then you move into popular acceptance and really mainstream tourism. And so, right, the cruise ships started going to Belize about 15 years ago, which put Belize as a country into the mind of a more mainstream traveler. And then you're right, about 8-10 years ago, the brand started to pay attention. And we do. We have a Hilton. We have a Curio by Hilton. We have an Autograph by Marriott. Our company, ECI, we picked up the Best Western franchise. And so we operate a Best Western on the island for that middle-class market. And then Marriott, obviously, for the very high-end traveler who wants an oceanfront 4 or 5-star kind of property. So yeah, but the brands are paying attention. And by the way, we're just seeing the beginning of that happening. This popularity curve, Belize has entered what I would call the fast growth period. And over the next 5, maybe 8 years, we're going to see incredible growth in the tourism industry. Airlift is up. JetBlue just started flying down. So we're starting to WestJet. So we've got Canadian Air. We've got a discount carrier, Southwest. So when those things start to happen, what you see is a market dynamism that's, really, it's exciting and it's going to change very, very rapidly. The pace of change is going to grow rapidly as well. So great time to look at Belize if folks are interested in sort of that positioning in the path of progress in a marketplace.
Each time I visit Ambergris Caye, Belize, the level of development increase is palpable. And yeah, this is an opportunity for a U.S. or Canadian buyer or a buyer from outside that nation to come in. And it's just a very easy step with the English language and the common law in Belize where you can invest yourself in this Marriott project that Mike discussed. Now, Mike, a while ago, to change topics, you recognize that the world has been really deforested and losing its valuable teak hardwood forests. So continuously since 1999, you've offered a program so that individual investors at a really affordable price, we'll get to that price later, they can own quarter-acre parcels with the property deeded in their name and reap the benefits and returns from the growth of the teak wood on top of the land. And now, this is pretty novel because for hundreds of years, only the hedge funds and super wealthy had access to an investment like this. So get us up to date with what you're doing on the teak hardwoods, because I know that so many of our listeners and viewers have already gotten involved.
They haven't. Really, thank you for being one of the people who put the word out there, right? Because most people don't even know you can own teak. Or let's just back it up and you say own timber, right? You start there. You're right. Only the super rich land barons, hedge funds, those are the people that have always owned timber for centuries, right? And so I think in most people's minds, it's like, I can't even get there. How would I even do that, right? Well, then you take it overseas and you take it into something very, very specific like teak timber. That's just not on anyone's radar. So right. You have done a great job. Thank you for getting the word out to just let folks know that this is something that they can do. So quarter-acre teak parcels. We are now on our 3rd plantation in Panama. We have one in Nicaragua as well. And so we're on our 3rd plantation in Panama just because of the incredible number of folks, well over 1,000 folks now who have decided they want to invest and own teak. You said something really interesting, Keith. You said you get to own the land, you get title to land, and you get the harvest of the trees. That's absolutely correct. But it gets better because when the trees are harvested, they get replanted. And then the next generation of people, your children, your grandchildren, whoever that might be, get the next harvest. But because you still own the land and the trees are replanted, a 3rd harvest, and a 4th harvest. So what you've really created with teak ownership is generational wealth stewardship. And that is something that's just so far beyond the comprehension of so many people that it can be so easy and so affordable to do.
I'm an investor myself in producing land like this in Latin America. So I know what some of my reasons are for being interested in this. And yes, it's more than the fact that I'm just a geography guy. It's the fact that I know I'm diversifying in multiple ways at the same time, a different product type than residential real estate, and I'm getting international diversification in a different nation for starters. So are those some of the reasons that you see for why so many people are interested in the teak investing like this? What are their reasons?
Yeah, I think you've nailed a big part of it, which is the hard asset. A lot of folks, your listeners, readers in the newsletter, right? I mean, hard assets are important. I hope more people recognize that, right? And more people are, thank goodness. So hard asset, real estate being this particular hard asset, right? And then the international diversification. One of the challenges we have as U.S. especially, and Canadians to some degree, is that we kind of locked into the U.S. system. Like we can own, say, Toyota stock, right? Japanese company, or we can own Nestle, a Swiss company. But generally, we're doing it on the New York Stock Exchange. And so even if we own an international stock, it's still the U.S. basket or still the Canadian basket that we hold it in, right? And so when you physically own a titled property outside your home country, you have now truly diversified internationally. And there's a lot of prudence in that. And with even just tiny little percentages of your portfolio, 5% of your portfolio, 10% of your portfolio outside your home country and hard assets is prudent because you want some other baskets for those nest eggs. And Teak, because it's such a low price point of entry with a huge yield, by the way, that it has become very, very popular for folks who want that international diversification in a hard asset, but to have the true international diversification because it's a physical asset outside your home country. And then I'll just say this, and we can pick up on the theme or not. The other reason that people are looking at Teak in Panama and Nicaragua, by the way, both countries, is because of the availability or the qualification for a visa, for a second residency. And a lot of times people look at that as a plan B. If we kind of think maybe the U.S. is going off the rails or Canada or wherever your home country is, or it could go off the rails. Doesn't have to be now. It could be going off the rails in the future. Sort of that Boy Scout mentality of, you know what, I want a plan B. And if we have a second residency outside our home country, we now have an option. If we don't like the way things are going or where they get to, we can actually pick up and we can move, and we have the right, legal right, because we have a residency to live in another country. That's another reason that a lot of people have picked up the Teak, because it qualifies you for that residency. But I think the bigger reason is the international hard asset diversification. I think that's the leading reason people do it.
I want to ask you more about the residency shortly, but tell us more about the investment. We're thinking about maybe capital growth as the trees grow. And then what about the income?
Sure. And so I think, let me back it up. A lot of people think in cash flow cycles, right? If we have a job, we get paid every 2 weeks. You have a lot of folks that have invested in properties, we get a monthly rent check, right? Or if we have stocks, maybe we get a quarterly or annual dividend. Right. So those are what I would call the common timeframes that we think about in cash flow. But what the uber wealthy, what the hedge funds, what the family offices, what the endowment for places like Harvard, Yale, these big institutional thinkers have known for centuries is that there are actually other cash flow cycles that are largely ignored by what I would say the average investor. And those cash flow cycles are much longer. Teak, for example, is a 25-year cash flow cycle. Right? You plant the trees, and in 25 years, you harvest them. You plant them again, not them, you plant new ones, right? In 25 years, you harvest those, and then so on and so on. So what you're creating is this 25-year cash flow machine. Now, the kinds of returns are truly outsized. I mean, you're talking about double-digit IRRs. Now, a lot of people say, well, Mike, that's great, but what happens if I need the money in year 15? You can't have it because there is no money in year 15. Your trees are still growing, right? So it's this weird investment timeline. It's almost flat line until the very end, and then it jumps way up, and then it drops back down to a flat line again. And so it'd be silly to put tons of money into Teak unless you had 1,000 times tons of money, right? But for some small piece of your investment portfolio where you have enough cash flow coming in from maybe your job, your rents, your dividends, whatever, that a small piece that moves into this 25-year cash flow cycle with the thought process that this is how I steward wealth into the future to children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, because the 25-year cycle is almost generational, right? In fact, in the U.S., it probably is generational because we're having children in the ages of 25 to 30. So it kind of starts to line up with generational income as opposed to, sort of that whatever biweekly, monthly, yearly income. So it's just a different cash flow cycle.
That's right. And I brought up before that when you think about the growth of one of your investments, you now get to think about it in two ways. If you own a duplex, it might have growth in its price. However, it doesn't grow into a fourplex and have growth in its price. However, with Teak, you might have an increase in the value of the wood, perhaps on a board foot unit basis, and at the same time, it is growing in height and volume.
Absolutely. No, that's a cute way to say it. I never really thought about a duplex growing into a fourplex, right? That's good. Exactly. And so what you do, you're right. You have the physical growth of the trees, and we have located our plantations in the optimal growing conditions for Teak, and they are very known, right? I mean, the British started plantation growing Teak 350, almost 400 years ago. in Southeast Asia. And so the Brits have just meticulously kept statistical records of every plantation that they were involved with, the altitude, soil type, rainfall, temperature, on and on and on. And so it's really well known exactly where teak will grow well. And both where we have our plantations, it does. Nicaragua and Panama, I'm going to stick on Panama today, but the locations are dead center bullseye locations for the best optimal growing of teak. So you have this growth of a physical thing, right? But you mentioned the board foot price. And by the way, the track record on teak being grown in plantations is 350 years. So what a track record, right? But since 1972, the average price of teak over 51, 52 years has been 5.5% a year. That's the growth in the price of teak, right? And so, who knows the future, right? I mean, the future's the future, right? But if a 50-year track record on a 5.5% increase in the value of the teak itself is pretty powerful, right? That's a long track record of nice growth. And when we factor in our teak into our business plan, we take that 5.5 and we make it 0. We just say, what if there is no increase in the price of teak over 25 years? How much will the tree grow? And if that tree is cut down and is sold as lumber, when we'll talk about our sawmill in a minute, if that tree is sold as lumber, what's the value of that lumber today? And what will the tree be worth in that value 25 years from now? And so if things do continue to increase at 5.5% a year, that's just all gravy. And that just starts to take that rate of return and just ratchet it up even further.
Teak has a number of physical properties that make it valuable, from its beauty to its fire resistance and more. Mike has now touched on a few interesting things. We'll come back and talk about that soon, including how you can achieve residency in Panama by owning teak, what the risks are, and more about their sawmill that he just mentioned, adding value to the operation there. And then we're going to talk about what the prices are. We're talking with ECI Development Chairman and CEO Michael Cobb. More when we come back. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. I'll just tell you, for the most passive part of my real estate investing, personally, I put my own dollars with Freedom Family Investments because their funds pay me a stream of regular cash flow, and returns are better than a bank savings account, up to 12%. Their minimums are as low as $25K. You don't even need to be accredited for some of them. It's all backed by real estate, and I kind of love how the tax benefit of doing this can offset capital gains and your W-2 job's income. And they've always given me exactly their stated return, paid on time. So it's steady income, no surprises, while I'm sleeping or just doing the things I love. For a little insider tip, I've invested in their Power Fund. To get going on that, text family to 66866. Oh, and this isn't a solicitation. If you want to invest where I do, just go ahead and text family to 66866. For a lender that's a specific expert with income property, you need Ridge Lending Group, NMLS 42056. In GRE history, from beginners to veterans, they provided our listeners with more mortgages than anyone. It's where I get my own loans for single-family rentals up to fourplexes. Start your pre-qualification and chat with President Chaley Ridge personally. They'll even customize a plan tailored to you for growing your portfolio. Start at ridgelendinggroup.com, ridgelendinggroup.com.
This is the Real Wealth Network's Kathy Fettke, and you are listening to the always valuable Get Rich Education with Keith Weinhold.
You're listening to the show that's created more financial freedom for busy people just like you than nearly any show in the world. This is Get Rich Education. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. We're talking with ECI Development Chairman and CEO Mike Cobb about teak hardwood investing in Panama and Nicaragua. Mike, tell us more about how one can achieve residency, for example, in Panama if they own teak there. Maybe just how residency varies from citizenship.
Sure. Well, why don't we start with the second part, how residency differs from citizenship? I think that's a good place to start. Citizenship is you become a citizen of the country, you have a passport, you can vote, you have every legal right of that country, right, that a citizen would have. Residency, to use a U.S. term, is like a green card, right? It's the legal permission to live in that country for some period of time. Many of them are permanent. In fact, Panama's is permanent. So once you have a Panama permanent residency, you could literally pick up, you could move there tomorrow, and you could live for the rest of your life in Panama. And so it gives you the legal right to live there, but you don't have a passport, you can't vote. I guess that's the main difference, right? You don't have a passport, you can't vote. But for most people, in fact, the overwhelming majority of people, a residency delivers exactly what somebody wants, which is the ability to live somewhere, right? And if we don't care if we vote or not, I mean, right, we can still be citizens of our home country, U.S., Canada, wherever. We can vote back home. We're a citizen. We have our passport from those countries. But the right to live somewhere else is powerful. And so the Teak in Panama qualifies you in two ways for 2 quarter-acre parcels, and then the legal fees and stuff like that. It's just under $22,000, a little less, gives you permanent residency in Panama, right? That's such an affordable way to be able to, I call it the back pocket, right? The insurance policy or the plan B, in the sense that, like, I think a lot of folks are worried about the direction things are headed. And, you know, you have the Teak parcels, which are going to produce a tremendous return, and then this byproduct that you qualify for. And you have to get down there a couple times. I mean, there's a little bit of administrative stuff, there's some legal fees. That's all included in that $22,000, right? So that's all included. You have to go there a couple times. So there's a little bit of friction, I would say. But when you get finished with that friction, you are a permanent resident of Panama, and you only have to go there one day every 2 years. So you fly down every other year, whatever, go talk to your trees, maybe sing to your trees a little bit, whatever you want to do, and fly home, right? And you have a permanent residency. So it's a very easy, fast way to get that plan B. Now, in the future, if you ever said, well, I really love Panama, I'd like to live here. Panama's beautiful. The city itself has got skyscrapers, apartments on the 50th floor. Views are killer. You can be out on the beaches somewhere. You can be up in the mountains. So there are a lot of different climates and geographies in Panama where you might say to yourself, yeah, I think I want to come down here and live someday. Well, you already have your residency. You already have the legal right to do that.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. Now, Panama isn't predominantly English-speaking like Belize is, but Panama just has a lot of inherent familiarity and feel to a lot of Americans, since the canal is there and there is that strong American presence, and they've even dollarized their economy there, for example, in Panama. So it might be that nice plan B for you. And tell us more about the residency and the investment into the Sawmill and how that works. So it sounds like there's now a value-added component as you essentially vertically integrate and now have this Sawmill with the Teak. Tell us more about that.
So we've always factored in the Sawmill into the investment proposition, because if we were to just take the logs, for example, 25 years, you cut down the trees, you stick the logs in a container and send them off to China or India, which is where most of the logs go, the return on investments, it's not great. It's okay, but it's not great. The way you actually get a phenomenal return on investment is you take those logs and you turn them into lumber, which has about a 3 to 4x differential, or what we call first stage end product or simple end product, which would be something like flooring, which is basically lumber that's been finished one more level, routed and bullnosed so that you can put them together, right, on a wood floor. So those two modifications from the log all the way to the first degree of finished product, the returns start to really jack it up into that double-digit IRRs, right, over 25 years, which again is phenomenal. So we talked about price, but just to give an idea, a $7,000 quarter-acre Teak parcel at harvest turned into lumber and first-level finished product turns into about $94,000, right? So $7,000 turns into $90,000, which is a tremendous return. But the way you get that return is to deliver to the marketplace lumber and first-grade finished product. And so Sawmill has always been part of our business plan. Well, we are now 2 years away from our harvest on our first plantation, the one I planted back in 1999, right? I mean, it's incredible thinking that 24 years ago, planted a teak plantation. So we're 2 years from harvest. We have one more set of kind of odds and end thinnings of just trees that didn't quite grow right. We're going to use those thinnings over the next couple of years to practice in our sawmill. because you know what? We are going to make mistakes. I mean, you don't ever get it right the first time. So we're going to make mistakes. We're going to learn from them. And by the time we actually do the real harvest of that first plantation, 100 acres of teak, 2 years from now, we will be up to speed with our sawmill. We'll size up, we'll capacity up to do that. But yeah, so folks can actually, we have a $2 million opening in the sawmill, and it's a real simple formula. It's 2 times your money and then a proportionate 10% interest in the sawmill. So for example, just rough numbers off the top of my head, you put in $100,000, you get twice your money back in about a 3 to 4 year period as the sawmill really becomes operational. We take the first harvest. Like the thinnings aren't going to produce much. In fact, we hope to just basically kind of break even over the next 2 years while we practice. Then we cut down 100 acres of teak. We start putting that through the sawmill, right? So you get 2 extra money. You invest 100, you get back 200, and then your return would be about $13,000 or $14,000 a year ongoing after that, because you get a 10% carried interest in the sawmill into the future as well. So that's the investment opportunity that produces a shorter cash flow, much tighter on the cash flow window, but then a nice trailer for many years. But the investment's $100,000, so it's a more significant investment than, say, somebody wanting a little bite-sized piece of a teak, quarter-acre teak parcel, or 2 quarter-acre teak parcels paired with a residency that gets you that. So a couple of different levels of investment depending on what your goals are, but also what your timelines are.
We described the sawmill investment numbers there. And then just to clarify, on the quarter-acre teak parcels, they cost $7,000 each with an expected value or return of $94,000 after 25 years?
That's correct. 6,880. I'm using round numbers, but 6,880 is the quarter-acre teak. And right, at harvest, when it processes through the sawmill, a little over that, but $94,000 is returned to the investor. Along the way, I'll mention this, there are maintenance fees. It's about $150 a year. We just take a credit card. We just tap it once a year. That takes care of property taxes, thinning, cleaning, anything that they have to do at the plantation. So $150 a year is your maintenance fee. But yeah, 6,880 turns into 94,000 in 25 years. If teak continues to go up at 5.5% a year, the return would be better than that.
You probably have investors that come in, oftentimes from North America, maybe some from Europe, and they see this as, boy, really low cost of entry, $6,880 for 1 quarter-acre parcel. So are there any risks that one should consider, therefore, if they're a first-time investor abroad, maybe something they're not thinking about if they buy a rental single-family home in their own hometown?
Yeah, very different. I mean, in some ways it's very different. In other ways, it's pretty similar, right? You're going to get title to the property. The process of getting title will be a little different. You're going to have to send in copies of your passport, a notarized utility bill, just some things that you wouldn't have to do if you were buying a property in the States. But at the end of the day, you will get what's called escritura publica, public title. So it's a registered land deed. And so that part of it's all pretty similar. Risk factors, absolutely. The business plan has them in there. But the big ones are any kind of disease. It's monoculture. So, I mean, a disease could come through and kill all the trees, right? The good thing there is, again, teak has a 350-year track record of being managed and grown in plantations. So it has a long track record where they've kind of figured out, well, if this happens, then do this, or if this pest comes along, this is how we mitigate that. But nothing can mitigate all risk. The fire is an interesting one. Fire is a risk in the first 3 years of teak, so we call it baby teak. But once the teak trees are 3 to 4 years old, they're really above any kind of fire because you clean the plantation. I mean, the guys are in there with the machetes chopping to keep the brush and grass down. In the dry season, which, by the way, you mentioned the qualities of teak. The hardness of teak is actually the most prized quality. And so the hardest of the teak that we get will actually be taken and sold as marine lumber, which is an unbelievable differential in price. But only 5 to 10% of your teak would qualify as marine lumber. So it's a small percentage, but the value of that is very, very high because it's such a hard wood. But the rest of the teak tree is also likewise very hard. The dry season is what cures the teak. And so in the dry season, teak drops its leaves. And so it's very resistant to fire if you do good maintenance on the plantation, we do. So fire is only a risk really in the first 3 years. And we actually warranty the trees. If a fire comes through in the first 3 years, we replant the plantation for any parts that are burned. So there's sort of a warranty that comes with the first 3 years. I mean, the other risks are political risks. What if Panama goes off the rails? The good thing about Panama is it's got the canal, and that is a major, vital, strategic U.S. interest. I just don't see the U.S. letting Panama kind of go off the rails, but it could. But those, I think, are the three, what I would call main risk factors, and we mitigate those to the best way possible.
You heard Mike mention about the thinning and cleaning. Yes, there is ongoing management, but that is already handled and taken care of in any of the prices that you already mentioned. Is that right, Mike?
Yeah, correct. And we outsource to a company called Geoforestal. They've been our plantation manager since 1999, and they're phenomenal at what they do. They're world-class. They've been doing it for longer than 25 years, maybe 30 years at this point. But we outsource what we have to outsource because we're not plantation managers, so we find folks that are.
The same property manager for a quarter century, a property manager that actually doesn't get fired. Hey, that's a novel concept at times too, is what some investors back here in the U.S. are thinking with their residential real estate investments. If you want to learn more about this investment, I encourage you to check it out. You can do that through GRE Marketplace at gremarketplace.com/Teak. Mike, do you still offer tours?
Oh my goodness, yes. And I hope that you will take us up on the opportunity to come down and see the Darien province. But yes, we do. And I don't know the dates off the top of my head, but for folks who are interested, two things. One, we actually run a tour that's fun because it's a group of people and it's just, you come down and you do it. But if somebody says, hey, I can't make those dates, but I want to come see the trees, yeah, it's very reasonable. I think it's a couple $100. They pick you up at your hotel. They'll run you out to the plantation, bring you back. But it's a whole day. I mean, it's 4 hours outside of Panama City and 4 hours back. So it's a long day. And if it's a couple, it's still $200. It's basically for the vehicle out and back, right? The driver and the vehicle. So you can come anytime or you can come with a group. And if you come with a group, there is no charge. I mean, we get the van or the bus and we pay for it all. And yeah, we make peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and we have fun.
All right. Well, I think people are probably coming for the Teak more than the sandwiches, but that is a nice touch that you do for people because you do that whether someone is a GRE Teak investor or not, whether they haven't invested at all yet and they just want to go ahead and check it out. And you can learn more about those dates at gremarketplace.com/Teak. Mike, it's always such a fun chat to discuss something so exotic. It's been great having you back on the show.
Nice to be back with you. I look forward to seeing you in Panama one of these days.
Trees grow through recessions. They grow through market cycles. They grow through COVID. And trees just keep growing through every single Fed rate decision. The wealthiest families on the planet, the top 1%, they have locked up vast portions of their wealth for time frames even longer than the 25-year Teak harvest cycle. In fact, Harvard has fully 10% of its endowment specifically in timber. To follow up on what I asked earlier, as we're discussing non-residential real estate today, Earth's highest point above sea level is Mount Everest. The highest from base to peak is Mauna Kea, but Earth's highest piece of land, the highest point as measured from the center of the Earth is Chimborazo Volcano, Ecuador. That's because Earth is not a perfect sphere, but there's an equatorial bulge. That's what I was climbing 10 days ago, Earth's highest real estate. Chimborazo is also, therefore, the closest real estate to the sun and moon. But back down here at a lower elevation where the teak plantations are in Panama and Nicaragua, there are no loans for teak, but at prices under $7K, many GRE listeners have found that they don't need a loan, and they have bought 10 or more parcels, but you can buy as few as 1 or 2 quarter-acre teak parcels, and then later cash it out for yourself or build that wealth legacy for your family, kind of like the top 1%. If it sounds interesting to you, learn more, get started at gremarketplace.com/Teak. Until next week, I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. Don't quit your daydream.
Nothing on this show should be considered specific, personal, or professional advice. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, financial, or business professional for individualized advice. Opinions of guests are their own. Information is not guaranteed. All investment strategies have the potential for profit or loss. The host is operating on behalf of Get Rich Education, LLC exclusively.
The preceding program was brought to you by your home for wealth building, GetRichEducation.com.